So good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to educators, researchers, and participants joining us from across the globe for the third session of the International Symposium 2026 on Artificial Intelligence in Education, Opportunities, Ethics, and Innovations, organized by the International Society for Educational Innovation. This symposium serves as a vibrant platform for global dialogue on the transformative impact of artificial intelligence in education, while also addressing the ethical considerations and innovative practices shaping the future of teaching and learning. For those who could not attend the first half, in the first half of the symposium, participants witnessed an enthralling, engaging panel discussion on teaching with AI, possibilities, puzzles, and paradoxes, which featured Eric H. Roth, Robert A. Philbeck, Brent Warner, and Tarul Patel. The symposium also featured an insightful expert talk, which was the second session, on the accessibility in education and the possibilities and impact of AI, which was delivered by Shankar Subah S. from Agate Infotech. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last 15 years, we have witnessed one of the fastest shifts in the way human beings use technology. The way we communicate, work, learn, and teach has changed dramatically. And that too in a very short span of time. And now with AI becoming part of everyday lives, it's no longer just a buzzword or a passing trend. It's here to stay. It's beginning to shape the way teaching and learning actually take place. And as educators and researchers, this is something we cannot afford to ignore. Whether we fully embrace it or still have questions about it, AI has started to influence education in many ways. And those who choose to completely overlook its presence may eventually find themselves falling behind in a rapidly changing educational landscape. And that is the exact reason why today's conversation with Nik is taking place. Let me take this opportunity to introduce today's speaker, Nik Peachey. He has spent more than 30 years working in education and helping teachers make better use of technology in the classroom. And over these years, he has taught in different educational settings around the world, which has given him a strong understanding of both the challenges and possibilities teachers and learners face in today's digital environment. A lot of Nik's work has focused on practical ways to improve teaching and learning through technology. And he has shared those insights through workshops, presentations, publications, and teacher training programs. Nik is also a learning technology consultant. He has worked with schools, organizations, and governments to help design effective strategies for integrating digital tools into education and supporting teacher professional development. Nik is a remarkable author as well. His contributions to the field of educational technology and digital learning are significant. I'll name a few books: ChatGPT for the language classroom, team building activities for the remote classroom, digital tools for teachers, thinking critically through digital media, to name a few. He has also co-edited Creativity in the ELT Classroom and Creativity and the Sustainable Development Goals for the British Council. He has edited the EdTech and ELT newsletter. His work has earned international recognition. That includes 2 British Council Innovations Awards. And he continues to work closely with educators around the world on emerging trends in education and technology. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Nik Peachey. We are really looking forward to hearing his thoughts and learning from his experience today. However, before we begin, a quick note to the audience: please hold on to your questions until the end of the session. We will have a dedicated Q&A segment once the speaker concludes his address. Nik, over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that great introduction. That's a lot to live up to. I'll just see if I can get my screen to go full screen. Great, good. And I'll just open the chat in case there's any comments there. Okay, great, good. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for everyone who's put messages into the chat explaining a little bit about their context. It's really useful to know that information, just because it enables me to sort of orientate what I'm saying in terms of what your context and what your experience is. So thank you very much for that. Um, my own context is as Chintan said, is working with teacher training, and mainly I've worked with teacher training and in publishing within the context of English language teaching. So some of the examples I get will be from sort of an English language teaching context and teacher training context, but they are adaptable, and I'll be showing you prompts as well that you can adapt for them. Okay. Just go to my next slide. I won't spend a long time introducing myself, but this is a bit of information about me. I'm pedagogical director of Peachey Publications. These are some of my books that you can see, the ones about AI anyway, that I've published over the last 2 to 3 years, when I've been taking a special interest in AI and its potential. What I will do at the end of the presentation, I'll share a link in the QR code so you can get all of the presentation, all of the links and all of the prompts and slides from the presentation. So don't worry too much about trying to take notes, okay? I'll give you everything at the end, a link to everything at the end. Okay, just admit someone else. And there's links to my social media here along the bottom as well, if you want to follow me on social media, where I share quite a lot of things for free. In this session, what I'd like to look at is just start with a little bit about exploring how you feel about AI in your own context. And then we'll look at AI assistants and chatbots, and I'll look back at some of the history and what informs the way I think about them now. We'll look at some ethical considerations, and then we'll look at some of my ideas where I think education should be going in terms of its use of AI, and that's collaborative prompting and prompting for interaction. I'll also share some tools with you if I have the time, and some resources, and we can finish with a Q&A. Okay. Just to move on. So what I'd like to do is start by exploring a little bit about how you actually feel about AI at the moment. And as you can see, there's a QR code on the screen. If you can scan the QR code with your phone, if you have one handy, scan the QR code, and it will ask you to suggest 3 words which explain how you feel about AI in education. And then we'll be able to see them together. The questionnaire looks a little bit like this. Hopefully that's going to open. When it opens, so just put 1 word into each of those fields, and just we'll be able to see a word cloud of how we feel. I've put the link into the chat as well if you're having trouble with your QR code scan. Let's go back to there's the QR code. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. So just think of 3 words, could be adjectives that sum up how you feel about AI in education. Then we can go to the word cloud, see if anyone's entered them yet. Okay. It's always good to see this because it gives me some impression of how people are likely to react to the things that I'm saying. A lot of these seem quite positive, actually. Excited and curious, great. Change maker, companion, passionate, change maker, transformation, involved students, enhance. Yeah, great. All of that sounds very positive. That's good. often when I talk to teachers or people who work in education, a lot of the response is anxiety and in some cases frustration. So it's nice to know that. But, you know, if you're feeling those things too, that's okay. And that's quite understandable. Okay, I'm just admitting a few more people. Still people arriving.
Nik,
Okay,
I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you, Nik.
let's move on a little bit. So I just want to sort of share some of the background to this talk and some of the things that have informed the way that I think about AI and using AI. And my my first oh, actually a question for you first. When do you think the first AI chatbot was invented? Could you, if you think you know, type the year into the chat. When do you think the first AI chatbot was invented? Was it ChatGPT in 2022 or was it earlier? Which do you think? If you're feeling brave, you can type your responses into the chat. We've got one suggestion for 10 years ago, I think earlier, 2014. Yeah, good, good. It was actually 1966 when the first chatbot was invented. In 1966, there's a video about it here, which you can watch later if you just click this button. And the first chatbot that was invented was called Eliza, or Eliza, depending on how you pronounce this. There's a video here that you can watch later. Somebody's got it right. Yeah, 1966, Eliza. Yeah, and it was invented as a way for people to get help, psychotherapy, and it was invented as a tool to interact with people rather than give them answers. And that in a way that kind of still informs the way I think about AI now. I just want to get rid of that for a minute. That still informs the way I think about AI now, in that it was invented as a way of that somebody could go and talk to it and tell it about their problems, and it wouldn't answer their problems. It would just reflect their thinking and get them to think more deeply about the problems that they have. You know, and I think this is a kind of approach that I've tried to adapt in my thinking about AI myself. And that is thinking about it as a partner who can help us to explore our own and deepen our own understanding of things. And I'll try to explain how we can realize that within this discussion or this presentation. The first time I actually used AI with my students was actually in 2001. I think it was 2001, 2002. At the time, I was working in Morocco. I was working for the British Council teaching English, and I was teaching a group of teenage students who were about 12 or 13 years old. The students had a very good level of English, but they were very reluctant to talk to each other. So I was finding it very difficult to find opportunities for them to actually, practice their English, use it and improve it through practice. And that was becoming increasingly difficult. So at the time, I decided to look around and see what technological solutions were available. And one of the things that I thought of was maybe chat rooms, because at the time chat rooms were very popular. I don't know how many of you remember chat rooms, but they're a bit like our chat feature here, that you could just go there and chat to people who you didn't know. I soon realized that this wasn't a very good idea for my 12 or 13-year-old students, because when I went to the chat room, the only people there were interested in asking whether I was male or female. If I said I was male, nobody wanted to talk to me. If I said I was female, everybody wanted to talk to me. So, and not particularly good discussions. So most of the conversations I was having with these real people were things like, "Hey, what's up, dude?" or "How are you? Where are you? Are you male or female?" So I wasn't having any good discussions there, and I realized very quickly that it wasn't a suitable place for my teenage students. But what I did discover at the time was that there was a film that had just been released, and it was this film called AI, Artificial Intelligence, and it was a film that was produced by Stanley Kubrick, and it was based on the concept of the Pinocchio story. It's a futuristic film, and in the film, the character of Pinocchio, as you probably remember in the original, Pinocchio was a puppet boy who wanted to be real, but in this film, the character of Pinocchio was an android boy who wanted to be a real boy, and he wanted his mother to love him. The good thing about this film, it's a very interesting film, and it explores a lot of the ethical issues that we're starting to encounter now as AI becomes more human-like. But the good thing about the film for me is that it had a website to promote it. And on the website, there was a little chat window, and you could go there and interact with the character from the film. And it was very AI based. It was based on a kind of a question response kind of thing. So you could go and interview the character for the film. And so I did this with my students because I thought this would be very safe. And my students went to their computers and they had a chat with the character from the film. And they really enjoyed it. And I found that it was very interesting for them because they knew it wasn't a real person. They were much more open about the things that they asked it, and they asked very interesting things. They were asking things about love or relationships or art or very philosophical questions as well. And I found that they really enjoyed this interaction, and they were able to do this in a way because it wasn't a real human being, or it wasn't someone that they knew. What they really liked about it was that it would answer any question that they asked. Unlike their teacher, it never got bored or tired or impatient, or unlike other real people. And it had no ego or self-consciousness, so it would always answer honestly and give its honest opinion, which was very nice. The problem with AI at that time was was that it had a very short attention span. So it was only able to sort of respond to a question. If you wanted to enlarge the conversation and ask follow-up questions, then it was very difficult. It was like talking to a goldfish. It had forgotten what the last answer was. So you would say something like, who's your favorite artist? And it would say maybe Picasso. And if you would ask, okay, why do you like Picasso? It had already forgotten that it had said Picasso was its favorite artist. So it became frustrating after a short while. But, I saw that there was huge potential, which when I first tried ChatGPT, I saw that potential was now real, and students could have these realistic conversations with an AI. And so now AI can follow conversational threads of up to about 4,000 words, I think. It can instigate response, and it can also be programmed, which is very useful and can power other apps. And we'll look at some of those things as we go through the presentation. Before we move on, I mean, this is something that I've touched on basically already, and something that we all need to think about before we use AI with our students are ethical considerations. And I know there's been some talk already about ethical considerations today, but I'd just like you to, if you can, to scan the QR code and type in what you think are the most important ethical considerations we should be thinking about as teachers who are using AI. Okay, I'll give you a minute or two to do that, and then we can come back and see what the major considerations are within the room. I'll go to my next slide where we should be able to share, see what people are sharing. This is a compilation of the kind of the of the talks that I've been doing, and so I've used this slide a number of times, so you can see the ideas of other people as well. The words that appear biggest are the ones that most people are concerned about. As you can see, some of the biggest ones are cheating and plagiarism, originality, reliability, critical thinking as well, and data privacy are also big ones. Honesty. As you'll see, it's changing as you add your suggestions. But still, plagiarism remains one of the biggest ones. Okay. So I put together actually a list of what I think are some of the critical issues we should be considering. And when you get the presentation, if you put the mouse over these, you'll see an explanation of what each one is. So you can check these out later, but I'll just talk through them. Of course, plagiarism is there. That's one of the things that everybody suggests. Also, personal safety of personal information, that's the data one. And that's something that we should be looking at and checking whenever we're using an AI tool with our students to see what kind of data security we have. Also, there's this issue of uncritical use and the sort of failure of critical thinking. Also, the potential that AI has to hallucinate. Bias is also a big issue, I think, and I think there are two aspects of bias that we need to consider. I mean, one aspect of bias is that, we should be aware and make our students aware that the results that they get when they ask a question from AI come from a collection of information that's based on the internet. And of course, because that information has been put there by people, it reflects the bias that those people have. There's certainly a bias towards information that's been provided in the English language, for example, and so there will be biased views that come from the English language speaking culture. There is an element of bias that we often don't consider, though, with regard to AI. And there is one way in which it doesn't show bias. In fact, it refuses to see bias. And that is in the way that the person who interacts with the AI will get the same response regardless of who they are, whatever gender they are, whatever race they are, whatever color of their skin. When they go to an AI and ask a question, they will get the same response from it, regardless of all those things. And that we know that actually isn't true of their teachers in some regards. We know that teachers have favorite students. There are some students that they would prefer over others. And that even as teachers, to the best of our ability, we try and remain unbiased towards our students, but we inevitably carry cultural biases with us when we look at our students. And in a way, AI doesn't carry that. So there is an opportunity there as well to overcome bias. I think age restrictions are something we need to be very aware of, particularly if we're choosing tools that we use with students under 13. Copyright issues as well, is not just in terms of the data that's stored within the AI, but also if we're producing something with AI, we need to know whether we own that once it's produced, and that's something we need to check. Equitable access, again, another big problem is that, not all students have access to AI, so we need to be able to provide them with that. I think there are identity issues. Many AIs are able to create voices and images that look like real people, and in some cases, real people that exist. And so, the potential for that of deceiving people is very great. So we need to consider that, and our students need to be aware of it. There's an issue of where the information is sourced from. Do we know? That's something we need to consider. And there's also this issue of the erosion of trust. Okay, I need to admit someone. Erosion of trust. And sort of, because AI tools hallucinate, how can we be sure that they're giving us honest information? Again, I think this is important, and it's not a reason not to use AI, but it's something to make students aware of so that they get used to checking it. They need to think critically about the information that AI is giving them. They need to check that information and verify it with another source, at least one other source, or two or three if possible. So these are actually, our response to these ethical considerations should inform our teaching and make our teaching better and make our students more aware and better critical thinking because of their awareness of this. There's also the issue of erosion of confidence. I think a lot of students and a lot of people who use AI think that it can do something better than they can. So there's the impact that that has on their confidence, which I think is considerable. I know that AI can do some things better than I can. I have to admit that there are some things that I get it to do because I know it does them better than I can. And the last thing, of course, is the environmental impact. It's something that we hear more and more about is the amount of water or the amount of energy that AI is using. And that is considerable. And it's not something that we can ignore or neglect, but we should be aware of it in terms of how we can minimize the amount we use, not using it needlessly. But the other thing is that we can look at the companies that are providing us with AI services and look for tools that we can use that are environmentally sound and ecologically sound. There is a version of ChatGPT called Green PT, which hosts servers in cold countries and uses the heat it generates to heat the cities that it's close to. So, we can offset the production of the heat that it transfers against the environment. So there are things that we can do. It's also worth looking for tools and AI tools that we can use, which can be installed on the computer and then don't need to go via a data center. And those kind of tools can minimize the impact on the environment. So there are things that we can do about that. And we need to start thinking in terms of using those tools and putting pressure on companies that provide AI services so that they know we're aware of those things and they need to take action on them. Okay, I'll just diverge a little bit. I know one of the main concerns of many people, especially if you're working in universities where you're used to assessing students based on assignments or essays, or written exams, is the potential for sorry, for cheating there. Okay, and what I've done is I've produced a video which has some suggested solutions to that, and you can watch this later. I won't play it all now. Let's see if it's going to open first. It might take a little while as my connection isn't terribly fast here. So what I did to produce this video, I used two AI tools to produce this video, and it has 10 tips for stopping students from using AI to cheat. And I actually produced the video using an AI tool called Lumen 5. And for the information that's in the video, there are 10 very good tips. I actually used ChatGPT and I asked for its advice on how I could use AI and how I could stop my students from cheating. It's a bit slow to load, so I'm going to pass on that, but you can watch it later. And it was produced using a tool called Lumen 5. And that's, it's a very good example of how we can use sort of AI to help us and to help us educate ourselves and our students about some of the dangers. It's very easy to use. You just produce a text and then you put the text into Lumen 5 and it generates a video for you about that text. It highlights different parts of the text. You can see examples here on the screen. And then you can add audio to it if you want to, and it automatically adds images. So there are things that we can do to sort of remedy this problem of cheating with AI and of plagiarism. What I want to do, for me, what's more important, I think, within this session is to actually look at prompting and some of the ways we can use AI in a more productive way that does encourage critical thinking and encourages ourselves, both for teacher development and for our students to development, to use AI in a more productive way. And that's something I call collaborative prompting. For me, the idea behind collaborative prompting is that you use AI as a thinking partner that encourages you to think rather than something that does the work for you. So, an example of that, the differences would be a lot of teachers go to an AI and they tell it to write a lesson plan for them. And it will produce a lesson plan for them. It might be a good lesson plan, it might be a bad lesson plan. Or some students will go to AI and say, write an essay for me. It might be a good essay or it might not be a good essay, but they don't critically think about it and they don't learn anything from doing that. So instead, what we can do is we can go to AI and develop prompts that get AI to walk us through the process of doing that ourselves. So we work in a much more Socratic way. So the AI asks us questions, and so we do the thinking for ourselves. We just answer the questions in that, and in that way we kind of build the response. So, for example, for my lesson plan example, I would go to AI and say, "Hey, help me plan a lesson. Walk me through the stages of what I need to think about in order to produce that lesson." And it will ask me a number of questions, and I will answer them and share my knowledge about my students in order to produce a lesson plan. So in the process of doing that, I learn how to produce that lesson plan. I'll give you a few prompt examples. So this is we'll look at a prompt that can show you how to learn or study anything using more of a Socratic approach. If you're not familiar with the Socratic approach, there's a slide here that shows you tells you a little bit about it. So it's a method of getting students to think by asking questions and to lead them by asking questions. So it's not directive. You don't tell them things. You just ask them things, and it's driven by dialogue. You know, it's a dialogical process. If you're not clear about that, you can check out this slide later. But I'll show you a prompt that helps you do that. Yes, I do have a prompt here, and we'll work through that process. We can use ChatGPT to work through the process. So this is what the prompt looks like. And you can use this prompt to learn about almost anything. So it starts by saying act as. So most of my prompts start with act as. So in this case, it says act as a Socratic mentor. Whenever you're prompting AI, it's good to tell its role first, so it understands what it should be doing and it understands the field of knowledge that it needs to draw on, so that it's not drawing from the whole of its database. So I start with act as a Socratic mentor, and then I tell it the goal is to use a Socratic approach to help me develop my knowledge. Do this by asking me questions to help me explore. Okay, and then I've added this part to give it the method that I want to use. So after each question, wait for me to reply before asking another question. So that stops it just printing out 10 or 20 questions about the same subject and turns it into dialogue. So when I've finished exploring the topic, summarize our discussion and make suggestions or areas of related knowledge I could further develop. So this should help it summarize our interaction at the end, and then it will show me further fields of knowledge that I should think about and other avenues to explore. I'll show you how this works in practice if I go to ChatGPT and I type in my prompt there. So that's the prompt, and I click enter. It should start then to walk me through this process. If I want to, I can use sound for this. So it could be a spoken interaction if, for example, my students are doing it on the phone, or it could be written. I don't want to dictate it, so I go down to the bottom. But it starts by asking me, what topic would you like to explore together through questioning? So I go down to the bottom and I type in my topic. I'd like to explore the use of AI in education. So if I press enter there, come on. For some reason, it wants me to dictate it, which is really annoying. I can't get it to enter. Okay, it's not. Okay, come on. Sorry, I'll try ChatGPT. Oh, sorry, I'll try DeepSeek. ChatGPT doesn't seem to be working for me at the moment. I'm on a very old laptop, I'm afraid. DeepSeek. Okay, let's try this. I put it in there, press enter. Of course, I'll act as your Socratic mentor. Let's begin. Tell me what topic you'd like to explore for this. The use of AI in education. I'll put in my topic, and it could be any topic. And it starts, excellent topic to examine. Let us begin. What do you currently see as the primary use of AI in education? Is it to replace certain activities or enhance them, or something entirely different? So I can say it should enhance. Luckily, it understands my bad spelling. So let me ask you this. In a practical classroom scenario, what's one specific example of a task that a teacher currently does that you believe AI could enhance? And how would that enhancement change the teacher's role? Okay, so I'm giving an example. Okay, that's a thoughtful distinction. The teacher is a guide for self-discovery. Let me press a little deeper. So as you see, it's asking me questions and getting me to think more and explore sort of my ideas about my answers, which is sort of a very useful way of thinking, instead of just giving me the answers to the question and telling me how I should be using AI. We're exploring the area together, and we can continue that interaction over a period of time. It'll go into my history and I can come back to it and reuse it. So that for me is sort of a very kind of constructive way of working with AI. And again, as I said, you can use this prompt as a way to explore any topic. You could even give it to higher level students. If you have lower level students whose English isn't so good, you can stipulate the level of their English so that it applies to them and also always uses that level of English. But any student can then use it to explore a topic, and it doesn't tell them the answer. It just keeps asking them questions and getting them to think about it. So in that way, it also develops their ability to think critically and about how to address different issues and problems. So that's one example of Socratic method and collaborative prompting. Another example I can show you is more for teacher development. And this is about getting teachers to reflect on their teaching. And this is something that every teacher really needs to do. And when I do teacher training, I always encourage teachers to keep a reflective journal. Maybe this is something that you also do. I don't know if you keep a reflective journal so that you write in after you've done some teaching or teacher training. But it's a very useful thing to do. It's a very good idea to have a structure for that. And I think Gibbs' reflective cycle is a very useful structure as well. So because it has different steps that helps the teacher kind of vent what they're feeling, but it also gets them to analyze the situation and work through the situation as well. And at the end, it has this kind of action. It helps them put together an action plan. So they're not just reflecting, they're thinking about how they can take action at the end of this process. And that's Gibbs' reflective cycle. So what we can do is that we can use the AI and program the AI through collaborative prompting to use Gibbs' reflective cycle to help us evaluate our teaching experience and come up with an action plan. And there's a prompt here that does that. It says, act as a teacher mentor. As you can see, I'm sort of always starting my prompts with this act as role, and then the objective have helped me reflect on my teaching using the framework. A framework doesn't have to be Gibbs' reflective cycle. It will work with other cycles too. Guide me through the process using questions, wait for my answers. And then it says at the end of the reflection, help me by summarizing my learning points. So there's, a productive output at the end of this interaction. Again, I'll just grab that for a moment and we'll have a look at how that works. Just having to move things around on my screen. I go back to ChatGPT and I go for a new chat. If I type it in there, and where it says framework, I'm just going to edit it and put in Gibbs reflective cycle. Okay. And then when I do this, it gives me a quick description of what Gibbs' reflective cycle is. And then it starts with the first question. So it asks for a description. Think of a specific teaching episode you want to reflect on, maybe a lesson that didn't go as planned or a successful moment. Could be something that's puzzling you. So, and it tells you to describe what happened and what happened within the lesson. So I can write in there. Teachers explored. So I'm giving a very superficial answer. In my lesson today, teachers explored AI, but they weren't very happy about it. So that's my first description. Okay, so it says, thank you for sharing this description. And it said, teachers explore AI. Help me to understand exactly what happened. So it's not letting me get away with that kind of superficial answer, and it's asking me to dig deeper. So it's giving me more questions to think about and answer. And so as you can see, this is kind of this collaborative process of getting me to think through, the kinds of things that are happening in my lesson and what's going on in them. So again, AI is acting as a mentor and as a partner. And I think this is a very important and productive way to use AI, rather than just asking it to give us the answers. So hopefully that makes sense to you as well. I'll move on to another section. So those are two examples of collaborative prompting. If you can use this style and write your own collaborative prompts very easily, and this is the kind of style that I use, or structure that I use for this. So I always start the prompt, as I said, with act as, so you assign a role to it, and then you tell it what you want to achieve. So, for example, I want to reflect on my teaching, outline a process. So that could be giving it a process. It could be Gibbs' reflective cycle. It could, if it was a different task, it could be another kind of process. Could be a SWOT analysis or something like that. Sorry, I'm just going to have to close my shade. It's getting a bit too sunny in here. It could be a SWOT analysis or something like that. And then, tell it about your context. The more information you give it about your context and the sort of things that you do, the students you work with, it'll give you sort of better results. And then you can add some rules at the end. So you can tell it what language level you want it to use, or what thought level. So you could say, B1 or C2 of the Common European Framework of Reference, or you could ask it to address you at a PhD level or as a 5-year-old child level, depending on how complex you want the conversation to be. And then this last bit at the end, if you want it to be interactive, you have to add this bit, which is ask one question at a time, wait for me to answer before asking the next question. And that's the thing that programs it to become an interaction rather than just a stream of questions that you have to answer. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'll just have a quick look at how we can use this with students and this is called prompting for interaction. So students can sort of use AI to prompt them to do various different things. One of the things that I found AI very useful for is to make reading much more extensive and interactive. Often our students don't like to read, or that they don't read enough. Lots of them don't pick up a book and read through stories anymore because they're always online or on a computer. And I think that's really sad. And I think we can use AI to make reading a much more interactive process and much more engaging for them. And what I've done is I put together a little prompt that programs the AI to design a story based on a traditional story or a story from literature, but it puts the student into the story as they read it. So it provides a short part of the story and then gives the student a question. And depending on the student's answer, and these are very personalized questions, they never navigate their way through the story. So each student, as they read the story, will have an independent experience. So this is an example. It's quite a long prompt, and I've used the stories of the Arabian Nights as the basis for this one, and I've also added a language level. The pieces that are highlighted in yellow, you can actually edit yourself to change this to use it with a different story. So if your students are studying, whether it's a book by Shakespeare or a play or a novel by any writer, you can just replace Arabian Nights with the name of the story that you want them to explore. Tell them the level of their English. I've designed this for a B1 level of English. And then there's a starting prompt that gets them to ask a few questions, answer a few questions before they jump into the story. So once you've edited it for your students, you can just go and put it into your AI assistant. I'm going to use DeepSeek again. And I'll go for a new chat. I copy and paste it in. Okay. And what it does, it starts to write a part of the story for me. It writes a short part of the story. Here, I've got a paragraph here, and my students can read the story, and then it asks them a question. So it describes the setting for the story. It's the Arabian Nights, so it's set in Baghdad. And at the end of the first part, as you can see, it asks a question. What's your name? So I just put my name as Nik. And then it will continue the story, and it interacts with me. It says, welcome, Nik. The storyteller on the carpet notices you and smiles. He pats the ground beside him and says, oh, Nik, your name sounds like the wind over the desert, swift and full of secrets. Before I tell you a tale, tell me 3 things about the kind of soul who comes to the city. So it asks me some questions about myself. Am I a merchant, a warrior, or a poet? I'll say I'm a poet. Okay, and it responds to me again. Second question, when trouble comes, do you use clever words, a hidden dagger, or a quick sense of escape? Okay, I'll say words, as I'm a poet. Ah, so you're wise. Nik, a dagger can miss, but a true word can open a locked door or close a dangerous one. And then the third question is, what do you seek most in Baghdad? Treasure, revenge, lost love, or a story worth dying for? Well, I'm a teacher, so I'm always short of money, so I'll say treasure. Okay. And now, based around my interaction with it, it will design the story around my instincts and my character. And so I'll have another short part of the story to read. So I can read my part of the story, and each time I read, it will end with a question. And it's a very personalized question. It says, what would you like to do? Do you go to the old quarter and search for a casket? Do you buy a cup of tea at the fountain and listen to rumors? So, or you can type in your own answer. So I'll say, I'd like a Okay, so each time I answer a question, it rebuilds the story again, and it's always working around. It's always working around the answers that I have. So if you give this prompt to your students, maybe you can try it in class first if you have a data projector. But if you give the prompt to your students, they can work alone on their phone or at home or do the homework. And each of them will experience a different kind of story based around that Arabian Nights theme. And I think I think that's a very useful way of using AI to make reading much more engaging for our students. And this is just one of many ways that we can use it to sort of increase the engagement that our students have with AI and, develop their understanding of literature in this case and develop their critical thinking and their enjoyment of literature as well. So I hope you can see from these examples that it's not just a case of going to AI, asking for answers and putting them into an assignment. This is a way of using AI in a productive way to get students thinking, producing language, exploring literature, and exploring their understanding. We're running short on time, so I'll try and I'll go through a few more of these slides very quickly. Again, this is another template. This one is for language students, and it's getting them to role play. It could be for higher level students as well, because it could be any sort of role play. You can get the AI to act as a role play partner that interacts with your students. You just edit the prompt here, so you can copy and paste this and edit the highlighted areas. So you can tell it the chatbot's role, the place or context where the role play takes place, and then put in the student's role. You can add some rules about level and how the conversation should begin, and then give that prompt to your students, and they can practice and role play with the AI and use it as a practice partner for their language and their preparation. So it could be preparation for an interview, or it could be preparation for using language. So those are some examples of prompting. There are also some great examples of tools that you can use within your teaching. If you need tools, there are ones that can produce images, very convincing images. And this is an activity that I produced for my students to develop their awareness of AI and its potential to produce fake images. So I produced a series of images and asked my students to decide whether they think they're real or fake. So here's an example. What do you think? You can type into chat. Do you think that's a real image or a fake image? Quickly type in your answer, real or fake. Or you can put in R or F. Put it into the chat and see what you think. So I've got one answer. One person says it's not real. Fake, fake. Most people think it's fake. Okay. That one's actually real. It's a bit deceptive, but it is actually real, that one. There's another one here. Let's go to the next one. What do you think about this one? Is it real or fake? Yeah, this one's actually fake, although it does look very much like them, and it looks very real, And most of the reason that we know it's fake is because we know about context, but often our students don't understand context. We know that these people don't like each other and they're unlikely to be in a lift together, but our students don't have that background. So how do they know that this isn't real? No, and it's worth asking AI how they should know. Here's another one. What do you think about this? Real or fake? Yes, that one's real. And I'll do one more. You can look at these later if you want to. How about this one? Is it real or fake? And how sure are you? Who's 100%? sure it's fake? Anyone? And why? So these are good questions to start asking our students. Is this real? Is this fake? What makes you think it's real? What makes you think it's fake? And help develop their critical thinking and their ability to critically assess whether things are real or fake. This one looks absolutely real, and yet it is a fake. I know because I produced it. But if I'd seen it, from what I know about uh, Obama, this is the sort of thing he could do. I could believe that he could dress up to go to a children's party and dress as a clown. It's a marvelous thing about him, but that one is actually fake. There are some other ones, and some sort of, it's worth sort of thinking about the ways in which we identify them. This one, for example, this is quite a good one to use. What do you think this one is, real or fake? This one's a very difficult one to tell as well, especially if how it especially depends on how much background and context you have. It looks very, very real, but the reason to know that it's fake is that actually they've got the children wrong. The oldest one is a boy, the middle child is a girl, and the youngest one is a boy. Whereas here they've got two boys and a baby, which is presumably the girl. So again, that I know that, but I know it through context. For our students who don't have this sort of the knowledge of the world that we possess, it becomes very difficult to tell which ones are real or fake. Those images were produced using these two tools. This one is called Ideogram, and there's a link to it here if you want to try it out. So get the presentation later and you can try it. So there's Ideogram here, and you can produce 10 images a day using it for free. And there's another one which is very good for creating images of people, which is Stable Diffusion. And again, you get some free use every day. So, and if you want to pay $10, you can get something like 10,000 images. So these are useful things to use. There are similar tools as well for audio. There's some audios here which you can listen to later. I won't play them now because we're running out of time, really. So there are some audios here which are examples, and all of these were produced using different AI tools, and they all sound very convincing. The tools that I used for them, there's Copilot, and there's a link to it here. You can use this to generate an audio based on any topic, and then you can use that with your students. There's one called 11 Labs here, which I use a lot. And you can write a text and type it in, and then you can choose the voice that you use to produce the text, to produce the audio from the text. So this helps us sort of diversify the range of our materials. We can make them more inclusive by producing audio as well as text, or we can extend our students' knowledge of different accents by sharing audio with them. And this is one called Notebook LM, which is great for if you've got students at a higher level who struggle with reading lots of factual-based research. If you use Notebook LM, you can upload documents to it, and then it will produce a podcast audio version of those documents that your students can listen to. And that's a great way of providing them with background knowledge before they go into the more in-depth study of reading through all of those documents. And because the podcast, the audio listening is based on the text that you've uploaded, you know that it will be factual. There are no hallucinations there because it's just taking information from the text that you've provided. So that's a very sort of good way of providing, a sound basis for the information you want to share. There are also a couple of tools here if you want to try them. One for creating presentations. And again, you can produce 5 presentations from this just for free. And all you do is type in the topic and it will provide a presentation. There are some examples here if you want to check them later. And this is a great one for higher level students. If you've got students who have phones and they take them into the classroom, is a great one to use because it provides you with a presentation and it adds interactive features for it. So your students can follow the presentation on their phone and they interact with it and answer different questions as they work through. So give that one a try when you have time. If you're interested in these kind of resources and finding more of them and finding more information about AI and educational technology, and you want to keep up to date, there's a number of resources that I provide. I write a monthly newsletter called Educational Technology in ELT, and you can subscribe to that for free. If you scan the QR code, you should be able to subscribe to it, get a free subscription to that, and you'll get a newsletter once a month from me. And in it, I share examples of new tools that I've found and interesting articles that I've found. So you can either scan the QR code now or get it later. If you're interested in research and the background to these kinds of areas, there's another free site that I curate here called Scoop It, which is educational news as well. And what I do is I've collected together all the interesting articles that I like to read over the last, I think it's the last more than 15 years now. And I've put them together on that site, and you can go and search through them and read through them. So again, that's free. And if you subscribe, you'll get an update when I have new ones. And the last resource is this one. If you're into those tools, like tools for producing images, tools for producing audio, I also curate the site with tools on, so you can go and find those there. Okay, just either scan the QR code now and subscribe, or do it later. But all of those are free. Yeah. You can also check out my books if you scan the QR code. Those aren't free, but they go into much more depth, and you can find a lot of the kind of examples of things that we've done here. There are lots of books that I've published on my website here, and different lesson plans that give examples of using AI, things like that. So if you're interested in getting a deeper look into these issues, then by all means do check out my books. And the last thing is, I'm happy to try and answer any questions. If you have them, you can either type them into the chat, or I think maybe you can turn on your audio and ask the question if you want to. Chat is probably best if you type them in, because then everybody can see them, and I'll try to answer them. If you don't have any questions, there's a QR code there which has the link to this presentation. So you can scan the link and you can access the whole of the presentation with all of the slides, the different prompts, and the links to the different tools and the different websites. So feel free to scan that and explore those. I'll also put the link into the chat as well. This link is in chat as well. So feel free to type any questions if you have them. I'll wait a few minutes, and if not, then we can go and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Nik. That was indeed an incredible experience. Very insightful, very contentful and resourceful presentation.
Thank you.
All the way starting from green GPT to environmental impact to ethical considerations, collaborative prompting, Socratic mentoring, reflective style, and whatnot. Now the floor and forum is open for you to ask questions. Those who want to ask questions, they can either put their question in the chat box or raise their hands.
Yeah, I realize that's probably quite a lot of information to deal with in an hour, but do go back through the presentation and have a look at the slides and sort of pull out some of those tools. I think the best thing to do is try out some of the prompts yourself and see how they work with you, especially the Socratic one. I think that's probably one of the most useful prompts, and experience these things for yourself before you try them with your students. Yeah.
Surely it's going to be a positive problem of plenty. So we have appreciative remarks coming our way. Nik, really thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much for sparing time.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I think so. Dr. Rashmi would like to ask a question.
Yeah, Dr. Rashmi, please unmute yourself, ma'am.
How does one identify between fake and true photographs? That's an interesting question. I've just spotted one question about identifying the differences. A lot of people identify by looking at the fingers, counting number of fingers, looking at the direction of the light, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to do that. If you actually go to ChatGPT or whichever AI assistant you use yourself, you can ask it for some tips, and by all means do this. AI will tell you how to identify AI images. You can also upload them to AI and ask it if it thinks it's been created as well. But one of the best things to do is background research. There are things like you can do reverse image research in Google to see if they can find a similar image or if they can identify it. But there are quite a lot of useful ways of finding out, looking at the different light and things like that. But it's quite complex and it's becoming much more difficult because AI is getting better at doing these things all the time. Dr. Rashmi, would you like to type your question in?
Yes, I would like to ask, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sir, you have provided very insightful techniques and demonstrations for us. But my question is not related with all these things. Whatever you have demonstrated is truly useful for the classroom activities, even engaging the students, even engaging ourselves also. But my question is related with the ethical issues. Like we are human because we have the rationality and critical thinking. But if we are like outsourcing the rationality and critical thinking to AI, so my concern is that how do you address my question from your point of view, sir?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question about critical thinking. I've actually written a book on AI and critical thinking, actually,
Okay.
and I think this is a huge issue, but it comes down, I think, a lot to the way we train our students to use AI, and we have to train them to use it in a way that will help develop their critical thinking. It's sadly true that they aren't going to do this on their own. In a way, it's the fault of our education system is that education systems, a lot of them are directed towards assessment and getting students to pass exams, and so they've become much more focused on that than developing the real skills that they need to function in the world. And I think we really need to focus on helping them understand how to use AI in a productive way that will help them in their life, not just help them to get past an exam. The connection between exams and tests and real life is actually very tenuous, although, we do need certification in order to get through life. But I think we need to focus on real life, real world skills and developing critical thinking with AI, not instead of AI. I hope that answers the question to some extent, yeah.
Yes, sir. I have understood that we should be the facilitator to develop the critical thinking with the help of AI. But again, the question remains challenging, I think, in front of the whole humanity, because if something is given so easily, who would like to take efforts? But
Yes, yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a sad reflection on humanity at the moment. Is not, but this isn't something new, really. Most people don't want to think critically. They want answers. They usually want simple answers that have an emotional response, and that's the problem. Really, is that people. I think it's not just something caused by AI, but we've failed to really address this issue of critical thinking and why students should be thinking critically and why we need to develop this. It's something that we've neglected, I think, for years. When I was at school, I was never taught to think critically. I was sort of taught to pass exams, and that's part of the problem. We've got a hand up. We're Madhavi Sud. Madhavi Sud, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, Madhvi. Madhvi Sood. Ma'am, would you like to ask a question? Just a second, I'll try to unmute her.
Oh, there's a question about video, I think, which is from Madhavi. It says, is there an application which can figure out the differences also in video? Yeah, video has similar problems to images, that you can produce fake video now as well, and that can be difficult to detect as well, although easier than with images at the moment, at least. And usually, at the moment, AI really can only produce quite short clips of video. And so, if you think something is fake, try and find a longer version of that video. That's one thing that you can do. And also look carefully at the background. AI is very good at focusing on foreground action, but especially where there's a lot of movement, often in the background, it gets things wrong. It gets the direction of light wrong a lot of the time. So those sort of things can help you. But again, it's worth going to AI. Go to something like ChatGPT or DeepSeek and ask it that question. What are some 10 tips I can use for identifying fake video? And it will give you some tips that will help you do that.
Yes, Madhvi is unmuted now. Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much. This webinar was so insightful and very interesting right from the start. Actually, my question to you, sir, is very pertinent of the times. As you know, many of the youth, rather much of the youth are actually, I would not say the word exploit, but yes, they are exploiting AI for every small thing. Like a lot of queries are being generated by each person. And I read somewhere that every query, when you place a query to AI, they have to cool the servers, and gallons of water is being used. So then again, we'll come back to the same problem of shortage of water, which is very important for survival. So then to what degree and extent, my question is, number one, is it ethical to misuse AI? Should there be some kind of, since it is a new thing, everybody wants to explore it, but there should be some limitations to its usage or misuse. Second thing is, for students especially, sorry, it's a very long question. Many students, they are not thinking independently. They're just copy pasting their answers and things like that. So here we are again, like spinning around and round, like the proverbial dog catching its own tail. So how do we, as educators and teachers, overcome this and encourage students to think independently, sir?
Yeah, two good questions. I think the second one we've kind of answered already. It's very similar to the last question about critical thinking. We need to guide them about how to use these things in a kind of productive way. I think the first question is something new that we touched on a little bit. And I think, students do like to experiment and they do like to try little things. And this does have an impact on the environment. But I think there are ways that we can minimize that impact. And those ways are by looking for programs that we can download that run locally, either on the phone or the laptop, which don't involve going to a server every time. So those things don't have the same kind of environmental impact. I mean, there's an app that you can download onto your phone. I'll see if I can find it. I've got it on mine, which is something called Edge Gallery. And once you've downloaded it, you can download Google's Gemini onto it and run it locally on your phone. And so that doesn't use the energy that it would do if you're using, say, ChatGPT in your browser that's going to the server. And there are a number of different sort of things like this, different programs like this, like the image production site that I showed you, Stable Diffusion. You can download a version of that to run on your laptop. And so that, because it's running on your laptop, it's not using so much energy, your server energy. But that, so that's one thing you can do. The other thing is, you can look for companies that do have a green, environmentally friendly approach to this. Like, as I said, Green PT is an example of an AI assistant that runs servers in cold places, so it offsets the energy against heating bills, and so it actually doesn't have the same impact in the environment. In the future,
yes.
in the future, though, I mean, it's not true at the moment, but in the future, server farms can be developed in a different way so that they don't use so much energy. But that's going to take time and pressure in order to sort of make people change that way. Okay, thanks for the question.
Thank you so much, Nik.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madhviji, for asking that question. Thank you so much, Nik, for the whole presentation. I would